So that's the Foley Foundation, the Washington Post, the National Press Club, and the National Press Club Journalism Institute. And I especially want to thank the folks from Art Today who were so responsible for helping us get this fine group together. I am now going to turn it over to the wonderful Amanda Bennett, who's been a friend for a long time and is knowledgeable about these issues. So please give me a big welcome to Amanda Bennett.
Come on. Oh, hello. Hi. Come on in. I think one of the most interesting things about this is just who these people are and how they came to be who they are and how they came to be doing what they're doing. And so I'd just like to introduce them briefly and then turn it over to them in turn to say a little bit about the journey that took them to this place here. So thank you all for being here. It's a really important and interesting subject for all of us to learn more about. And honestly, preparing for this panel, I've learned a ton about the issues that these guys are facing every single day. So this is Atle Staalesen, and I would like to turn it over to you. And please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you. My name is Atle Staalesen, and I'm the publisher at the Barents Observer. And if you want, I can tell a bit about our media. We are small media. Well, and before I start, I would like to say thank you to the National Press Club and the Freedom of Speech Center, and also, first of all, to Alice Rogoff and Arctic Today, which is our partner and our good friend. We've been cooperating for many years and have a very good partnership. So thank you for that. The Barents Observer is a small media doing cross-border stories from the north, working about Arctic and working in the Arctic. So we are. If you look at the map which is on your chair, you will see that you'll see the Arctic, and our place of work and place of living is in Kirkenes, which is on the border of Norway to Russia. It's on the Barents Sea coast, just about 10 kilometers from the Russian border. So this is where we are working and doing journalism, and it's a region with it's a kind of a cross-border regions where Norway and the Nordic region meets Russia. So we are doing journalism on the Arctic and on Russia. So we started in 2002. And that's approximately 2.5 years after Russia got Vladimir Putin as new president, and 2 years after he started a gradual dismantling of the young Russian democracy that was developed through the 1990s. We publish in Russian and English, and our main mission from the very start has been to bring Arctic stories to people in our region and beyond our region. And if we're going to reach Russians, the home audiences in Russia, we have to use Russian language, and we continue until this day to publish in Russian. What kind of stories do we report about? We report about security. We live on the border to one of Russia's most militarized regions, the Kola Peninsula. And this is a tremendously important region for Russia, both economically and militarily. So Russia's most powerful fleet, the Northern Fleet, is in our immediate neighborhood, and Russia's most dangerous submarines, nuclear submarines, ballistic submarines, are based very close to where we live. But we do not focus only on security and military. We focus on climate change, which is increasingly affecting our region. We focus on indigenous peoples and business, shipping, energy, And we focus on civil society and journalism. We write stories about people from our region who, from the Russian side specifically, who are repressed and censored and even put in jail for their free journalism. And today we also write pretty much about war. We are located next to Russia, which is waging a very brutal and aggressive war in Ukraine. And that is affecting also our home region. That is affecting the Arctic very much. We write stories about Russian units from the north, active in Ukraine, and we write stories about the way the war affects the Russian north, how it affects local communities in our region. So we used to say earlier that this region where we live is, we said high north, low tension. We don't actually say that anymore because the Arctic is not the way it was before, a region with smooth and harmonic relationships between the countries, unfortunately.
So I think I'm going to stop you there and move over to Thomas, because I'll be asking you questions about many of the things you just talked about here. And so this is Tom Nilsen. Now, Atle is the founder and publisher, and Tom is the editor. And we're going to have a journalist here who I can see is waiting for us inside a little magic box back there. So please tell us a little bit about yourself, Tom.
For us in journalism, as a very small newspaper located nearly at the North Pole, building cooperation with other media, building connections to journalists across the borders in the region has always been very important, and we have done so and have had a tremendous good network into northwest Russia, and have helped regional journalists on the Russian side of the border through their struggles through the 1990s with economical problems, and after Vladimir Putin came with their right to actually publish stories and so on. In 2013, things started to change dramatically, also up in the north. Russia's then Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev came to our town, and he had a meeting with the Norwegian Prime Minister at that time, Jens Stoltenberg, the one who later became Secretary General of NATO. And it was in a pre-meeting that the Russia Security Service brought up one very important question they wanted to talk with the Norwegian police about. And that was the list of accredited journalists to attend the meeting, because they had a list of Moscow Kremlin journalists to come. But then there were 8 names on that list that they didn't like, and they want to have them removed. And those were the original journalists from Murmansk, from Petrozavodsk, and from Arkhangelsk that the Barents Observer had invited on a private initiative. And the FSB wanted to tell the Norwegians that such private initiatives were not very welcomed. Norway replied, since this was in Norway, that that's not the way we treat journalists. Those who want to attend the meeting should be welcome. So they came. The year after, in 2014, FSB made an official request to the Norwegian authorities to close down this Barents Observer, because the Barents Observer was not good. The reporting was not good for cross-border cooperation between Norway and Russia. And Norway once again had to say that, well, that's not the way we do it in Norway. So the story is actually that we have had now for more than a decade a fight for our own existence and the fight for our own right to report, and our right to build networks in the remote part of the Arctic. Here in the United States, we have done that with Arctic Today in a very good way, because we think circumpolar news exchange is good. On the regional level, we did it with Russian journalists. So in 2017, I became the second European journalist to be declared persona non grata to Russia. So I've actually not been in Russia for the last 8 years. And many of you are journalists, so you know that journalism is about being at the location, telling the story about the people. So that makes it very difficult for us. In 2019, Russia blocked the Barents Observer on the internet, the Roskomnadzor, the first Nordic newspaper to be blocked on the internet. And that gave us a lot of opportunities to develop new technologies to circumnavigate the censorship. So we have mirror domains, we are publishing on other platforms, we are using social media, and if someone wants any good ideas and tips to circumnavigate Russia's censorship wall, we can help. But we did also one other important thing. We did the technology, but we also challenged Russia because we think it is not fair that they block a media that is reporting about regional issues. And you know, Russia's constitution is very, very good. Article 29, freedom of expression shall exist, censorship is not allowed. That's the constitution of the country today also. So we took them to court. Guess what? We lost. But we appealed to the European Court of Human Rights. Russia at that time was a member of the Council of Europe. There were about 12,000 others in the queue in front of us, and we didn't want to take them away. So this case took 6 years, and it was decided by a ruling in the court this February.
Tom, why don't we let me ask, because I'm concerned that the contact with Olesia it's been cutting back and forth. So let me just let her.
She's our superstar.
Yeah. Yes. So let's go from the two superstars to the third superstar, and you've got a very interesting, very kind of sad story. But I think from what I've heard about you, that you think of it, as we were just hearing, as an opportunity as well. So this is Olesia Krivtsova, and you are one of the 4 Russian journalists that currently work at the Barents Observer. And would you like to tell people how you got there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Olesia, and yes, today I work as a journalist for Barents Observer. And I became journalist in 2023, but before I just got one story that happened with me. I was a student. Yeah, I have to introduce myself. I'm from Russia, Arkhangelsk. It's quite small city in the northern Norway and north of Russia. I'm sorry, it's just 2 p.m., almost 2 p.m., and I'm a bit sleepy. Yeah, and I got 2 criminal cases in Russia because of I just made some posts on Instagram, and it happened because of new Russian repression law, and also because I was denounced by my classmates in university. And I was sent under house arrest and got a criminal case that called discreditation of Russian army and justifying of terrorism, and I also was sent into Russian terrorist list, so now I'm kind of terrorist in Russia still. And when I was under house arrest, I decided that I don't want to go to Russian prison because it's I think you know about it, that conditions in Russian prisons, it's kind of torture, and that's why I escaped Russia. And then I decided for myself that I really want to be a journalist, and my current colleague Atle sent me a message and invite me to work with Barents Observer. And since 2023, I'm part of Barents Observer project, and we cover in Russia from Exile. And I can say that I really appreciate it for this possibility, because now I feel that journalism is, I can see myself in journalism in future.
And I'd just like to say these things happened when she was denounced, when she was put under house arrest, when she was facing Russian prison. She was 20 years old? And
I was 19,
19.
Yes.
And you decided to leave your home, your family, your husband as well? Everything left behind you in order to do this. So if you want to take some kind of a thought about the level of need to be a journalist that all of these people have take the kind of actions. I think you can see that in here. But you know, one of the things I'd like to keep talking about is the changes that happened over the time. And one of them I want to know is, right now you are here with them, working at the Barents Observer. You're in Norway, you're not in Russia. Do you feel safe where you are now?
Of course. Firstly, I was really afraid when I just came to Kirkenes and realized that it's approximately 15 kilometers from Russian border. I was really stressed. But I just also want to say that I wanted by Russia. And of course, I had this thought that, oh, maybe I will be kidnapped by FSB and those things. But no, I feel safe, and I never had kind of some experience to be kidnapped or something like this. But I know that Kirkenes is place where some FSB movements are going on, but I can tell you about it later if it will be possible.
Well, you're talking about the things that you're covering. One of the things that you were covering, and I read a great deal about it, was the presence and the growing presence of I mean, spies, for a better word, for Russia inside the region that you're living. Tell me how you found out about that and how it felt to report on that.
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question just a bit?
Olesia, if you tell them about the Russian diplomat walking the dog around your house.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you. It just was one story. It was my birthday, and we were celebrating kids. And when we went to smoke with my mom, we saw one man, and he was walking around my house. Then he had a very, very cute dog, and my mother asked him to touch this dog. And then he told us that he works in a general consulate, Russian general consulate in Kirkenes. I was surprised, and then I just started to follow him. I mean, started to see him around my places, started to meet him. Yes, sorry for my English, I'm a bit stressed. And one time I went to general consulate I had some things to do with my passport, and he was really cute. He was in a pink jacket and a very like friendly man. After this, I decided that he should be FSB because he was very friendly, and all time he was somewhere around me. Then I just started to do research, some small research in the internet, and I found his very old photo where this guy in FSB uniform kissing his wife, that she's currently also works in general consulate in Kirkenes. It was the first signal that he's not just a diplomat, and he actually was not a diplomat. He was just a guard. So open the doors in this consulate and do this not diplomat things. Then I also found how he written in other people phones. So he was written like Koля FSB, Koля Border Institute FSB. And then via closed services, I found that he worked for FSB in Russia, and I actually found his salary for this FSB unit. And then I understood that, yeah, it's 100% FSB guy, and that's why I wrote an article because we felt that it's very important. And FSB guy who are torturing people in Russia who are making crime, they should not be in Norway, in a free country where those things should not happened.
So Olesia, I think you've also demonstrated don't mess with a journalist. Yeah, particularly someone who knows how to do good research, right?
Yeah, and now he's not working here in Kirkenes anymore. I don't know. I didn't see him very long time, and I think it's a good result.
But tell me. Let me just go back to all three of you, because all three of you have talked about the same thing, about a time when in your town you could go back and forth to the Russian border. You were talking about how exciting it was living there and being able to travel in and out, and having all that change and be shut off from your ability to access it. How does that affect the work that you do? All three of you, could you give me a perspective on that? Whoever would like to start first, Tom?
It's no secret at all that it makes journalism very, very hard. I mean, journalism is about being at the place, telling the stories about the people. And today, when we are not allowed to travel, the border is closed for journalists and so on. We have to find other ways. And having Olesia in our newsroom, that we decided to establish a small newsroom for exiled Russian journalists, helps us tremendously. I mean, she is directly from the university, and she knows how youth people, students in Russia are thinking, and they have a very, very different way of searching internet and so on. In addition to Olesia, we have three others that are from the Russian north and that escaped Russia after 2022 because they wanted to continue to do their job as free journalists. So they are sitting today in our newsroom and reporting about stories that they would be put to jail for writing if they did it at home, if they had an editor at home that dared to publish those stories. And as long, I used to say that as long as the internet and the telephone system is working, we are able to do stories. And as long as we have commercial satellite photos, we can see the military movements on the Kola Peninsula. As long as there are some people crossing the border, we can do interviews. And one consequence of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 is that there are some place between 800,000 and 1 million Russians that left the country. And they are living also here in the United States, but most of them in Europe. And they have contacts back. So we have a lot of very, very highly skilled people that we still can talk to.
Let me just, I'd like to ask you about that, because Doug Jale, the foreign editor of the Washington Post, was publicly quoted during the time of Navalny's death saying that, you know, even if they had been inside Russia, they couldn't have done a better job than they did, because it was the system inside Russia had been so shut down. Do you feel like maybe, how about you, because you've been there the longest there, do you feel like there's some advantage that you have in kind of having to struggle for some of the work that you're doing?
I think it's a great disadvantage, as Thomas said, not be able to travel there, to see things with our own eyes and to talk with people. And that's a very, very big problem with Russia in general at the moment. It's very hard to know what's actually going on. There is less and less information available about what's really going on in Russia. So we have to circumnavigate and double check and find information via different sources. And it's harder to be sure about. It's hard to be sure about before we publish. Is this accurate or not? I think we are pretty accurate, because we've been working in this region for very many years, so we know the region very well. We've been traveling much earlier, and we have lots of people we can talk to. But still, it's hard. What's also worth mentioning, I think, is that we have gotten a status, as very many other media, as so-called undesirable organization, which is something that Moscow is very much happy to brand different critical independent media, and that makes it even harder for us to make those telephone calls and to talk with people. So, because the one we talk to, they potentially can be criminalized and fined. So it's a difficult situation. It's a dictatorship that is closing, getting more and more isolated.
And how do you know that your information, any of the three of you can answer this, is getting into Russia? How do you know whether or not all this hard work that you're doing is having an impact?
Oh yes, absolutely. We have several good indications. Most of people inside Russia that read us, they use VPN, so we can't see it on the statistics. But of course, when I, on a late Saturday evening, get a letter by email to me as editor directly from the prosecutor general himself in Moscow, telling that we are banned, I do understand that. Oh wow, we have an impact. Even today, when we are undesirable, Russian state media quote us, probably because the journalists writing the story don't know that it's not allowed to quote undesirable, or that we are undesirable. And the latest example is actually from Rossiyskaya Gazeta, which is a government-run newspaper in Moscow. And they quoted us about a Russian nuclear-powered submarine that was just recently launched from the shipyard in northern Russia. And when Russian state media quote a foreign media about their own submarines, well, but difficult, yes. But we have an impact, and we see it on the social media, Telegram channels, and so on. That people quote us. Yes.
We can mention also one more example, which is very interesting for us to see. A few months ago, there was a Ukrainian drone attack on Murmansk. Quite extraordinary, actually. It was shot down, but it was on social media. Some local people they made a film about this of this drone attack, but nobody wrote about it. No regional media wrote anything about it, and this is very interesting because this is a very military area with even nuclear weapons stored in this area. And there's a Ukrainian drone being shot down just a few kilometers away, and nobody in Murmansk knows anything about it. And we write a story about this because we actually see this. We see this film. There are two drones being shot down, and so actually Russians reading our newspaper can read about how their own city is being targeted by drones. So this is kind of very interesting for us to note and see that we do have a mission here.
So I was just thinking about that, Olesia, that some of the people inside Russia are depending on you to tell them what's going on in their own country. Tell me about how your friends and family are thinking about what you're doing and what you're writing. Tell me about the people back home.
Well, actually, my mother and my husband, they live with me here in Kirkenes, so they're saved. But I unfortunately now almost don't have any friends in Russia since I was kind of arrested, and I have no normal answer for your question. But I just about students, I can say that they're very they don't like anything connected with politics and war, and because in Russia it's kind of scary now to be an activist or to be a political person, even journalist. So I don't have normal answer.
So I was thinking about that because one of the reasons that you left was that you were denounced by your classmates. So there is a kind of a fear about what you're doing on the part of people.
I was denounced. I was denounced not because of my journalism, because I was not a journalist in time when I was denounced. I was denounced only because of some stories in Instagram that I did because I was I just wanted to tell my auditory about war.
So just to keep it in mind, I'm going to be opening it up to questions in a little bit, but I'd just like to ask a couple of things because there's some things that you have experienced, that you've had to go through, that I think will resonate with many people in this room because we're all facing the same thing. And one of them is your paper's independence. And you were originally part of a Norwegian group, the Norwegian Barents Secretariat, and you were with them for 10 years, and I gather it was a very productive relationship for everybody, and they supported you financially. And then what happened?
Well, it's a long story, but to make it short, this region was a region of Norway invested quite much in this regional cooperation. Norway wanted to have a good relationship with Russia, and Norway long thought it was possible to work with Russia, to have a normal cooperation, business, civil society, economy, etc. So Kirkenes was kind of a bridge as a East-West cooperation. Then, of course, step by step, it all collapsed, and with this collapse also came collapse in media cooperation. It became very, very difficult to work work as independent media, and the Barents Observer was part of a Norwegian government organization, and it became very clear to us that we needed all journalistic freedoms. We needed to anchor all of our activity in the principles of the free press, and that became a very difficult issue for the Barents Secretariat because they wanted everything to be nice and smooth between Norway and Russia. They wanted the cooperation to continue, despite the fact that the times were changing. So at the same time as Russia became what it has become now, we had the invasion of the annexation of the Crimea, and we had increasing repression of society, and at the same time we had this process in the Barents Secretariat which ultimately led to our exit from the Barents Secretariat, and we moved to a new location, and we took over the company ourselves. So we had a conflict where the freedom of speech, freedom of the press was in the center. So we did the right decision. We continued with our journalism, and we brought Barents Observer to another level.
And now you're a private stock company that is owned by the journalists in there, and to get contributions from various organizations around the and I guess taking on these Russian journalists, which is just wonderful. But I think we're all finding, in the press club, I think is also finding that this is a really serious issue when you have people coming out of the country and need and want the support to do what they really ought to be doing. So that's. But you said something to me when we were out in the hall, and I said, well, okay, why? Why did you do that? And you said something about yourself.
But I think that after working as a journalist in Northwest Russia for the last for a 20-year period, I've done that since the name of the country was Soviet Union, and I've been traveling around in Murmansk, and I have tens and tens of friends in their journalist community in Murmansk and Arkhangelsk and so on, and I've always been backing them. Stand up for the right of your journalism. Tell your editor that they cannot take bribes from private companies or regional governors and so on. And if we in the Barents Observer, after encouraging Russian journalists for 20 years, should back off and say that, okay, maybe we should stop asking critical questions or writing. I could never go back and drink beer with my friends in Murmansk anymore. So it was, of course, very important for the basic principle of free press in Norway, but not only in Norway, also in Russia. And I think that is one of the very important reasons why it was so easy to recruit Russian exile journalists to work with us when everything started to collapse in 2022, is because we have a reputation of saying that our freedom is more important than our salaries. So, yeah. Well,
that was what you
salaries
said.
are important.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
but you know what I mean. Yeah.
that was what you said to me, was that the freedom is more important than our salaries. And what made me think about is the theoretical things that we say and that we write, and we tell people about the need to stand up in the country, and then what happens when you're faced with having to do it yourself. So I think that's a very interesting story that you've been able to tell us. I've got, there's a couple of things that very much resonate with me, and resonate also in the journalism world. Now, you have a very clear statement on your homepage or whatever, it's that you do independent and impartial journalism, and yet you are very free with kind of interesting language. Like, for example, let's see now, dictator Putin, war criminal Putin. You use strong language that I think in this country would not be considered independent. How do you get those two things together?
I think this is one of the differences between ways of writing things in the United States compared with Europe. Our wordings of saying dictator Putin is because he is a dictator, and I mean, by the end of the day we have to stick to facts, and The Guardian do the same. Many other very good newspapers in Europe use such words, but war criminal, yes, he's wanted. He's wanted by the International Criminal Court, so it's a fact. And I'm glad you asked the question, because these are questions we have every morning in our newsroom. It is very important that we don't give easy answers to such kind of wordings, because words are powerful. Words are very powerful, and especially when we are talking about international conflicts and so on. Yeah, it's.
I think
you should all be at our newsroom in the morning. We have quite loud debates. So it's about different standards in
I
Russian
think every
journalism.
journalist in the room has struggled with something like this.
No, it's a good question, as you say. We have, and we debated it many times. Should we, for example, call Vladimir Putin a president of Russia? No, we have concluded that we will not call him the president of Russia, because he's not a legitimate president. And this is things we discuss on many different kind of words. But you're right. Our language has changed over the years. We have become more clear, so to say, about certain words. But it's also a fact that that the region where we live has changed tremendously, and we cannot, when we get information from Russia, from Russian official sources, we cannot trust it. That's the major problem. We cannot trust anything actually what is being said from Moscow, from a ministry, or from a government agency, or at least not from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I mean, there are so many disinformation and so many outright lies, unfortunately.
There is a saying that you should not trust anything before the Kremlin denies it. I remember very well. It was a morning some years ago, sitting in the office, and I got a news release in that there was a cruise missile that had exploded at a test site just outside Arkhangelsk. And I said, well, is it a news? It's maybe not the news. Last time there was a crash of a cruise missile in the area. It ended in a kindergarten. So then we wrote about it, but this time it wasn't anything. But then the news agency TASS released news about this cruise missile. And they ended the news by saying, and by the way, there were no releases of radioactivity. Oh. And then I pushed the big red button and said, let's check. And yes, then we went into the online monitoring system of the Severodvinsk town. And yes, there was a peak of several isotopes in the area at the time. And we started to dive more into it, and found a lot of photos of ambulances with people dressed up in moon-like kind of dresses and so on. It was the famous Nenox accident when a nuclear-powered cruise missile exploded, and 5 people of Russia's Rosatom agency were killed by radiation releases.
So I'm going to ask each one of you very briefly, before I turn it over to the audience to ask some questions. What you're doing is very hard. You're constantly struggling for resources. You're dealing with a closing environment. Things are changing. You've had to leave your home. one quick question. Why are you doing this? Olesia?
Thank you for this question. I think I do it because I always know that I have to do it. I didn't know how and which way do I have to use, but I chose journalism. I always saw what is going on in Russia, and I felt it by myself via those repressions, via those via this censorship, and I think it's journalism is thing that I have to do it now because I don't want to it going on in Russia.
Tom?
Vladimir Putin is not a threat to us. We are a threat to him. Journalism makes a difference. That's why we do it.
Well, I think it's we all know that we have to democracy and the rights we have, the civil rights we have. It's not something we can take for granted. We have to continue to work for these very important values, and we have to fight for it. That's a fact. That concerns Norway. We think Norway is a very, very democratic country, and it is. But we still cannot take this for granted. So journalism is a very, very important part of our democratic system. So it gives lots of sense to do journalism.
Great. Now I'd like to turn it open to questions, but I'd like also just to say, to commend all of you, because the Arctic Today and you have had these really very productive partnerships. And one of the things I think we're all finding as things get more and more difficult is that the kind of, we're so used to as journalists being competitive, it's very hard to be cooperative. And I think we're all finding that that's going to be turned on its head, and there's really only one way to work. 1, 2, 3. I got three things.
Yeah, when I used to travel back and forth to Russia in 2012 to 2016, there was a newspaper at the hotel called the Moscow Times, and it was somewhat critical of the administration in Russia. And I see that it still exists if I look on the internet. What drives that newspaper, and why doesn't the government suppress it?
The Moscow Times is in the very same situation as the Barents Observer. They are declared undesirable, which means that it's criminal to cooperate with them in Russia. So the journalists of the Moscow Times have left the country, all of them. Their main newsroom is today in Amsterdam, and they are writing from outside Russia. They are blocked on the internet in the same way as the Barents Observer, but we share ways of, wow, have you discovered this opening in the censorship wall? And they share with us.
So it's not available in the hotels anymore?
It's quite many years since it was on print. So it's also like the Barents Observer, only on the internet. But it exists, and it does a very good job.
May I just ask you to identify yourself when you, I forgot to ask you that. Go ahead, tell me.
Mike Irosius, retired federal.
Good. And you, for the next one?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Sjogren, and I'm a professor at Northwestern University. Many years ago, I was a correspondent in Russia, and I got so close to you, I went to Murmansk and Nika. So I've been in the region and saw the most amazing northern lights that couldn't be imagined. Anyway, the question I have for you is what you can tell us about the increase in infrastructure that Russia has been having, the buildup in your region. Can you actually see something? Do you have reporting on that? What's happening in terms of oil and gas drilling and icebreakers and all kinds of infrastructure that Russia is pushing towards the Arctic? I know it's a priority of Putin's.
Russia has had a tremendous build-up of, especially in the ports and petroleum industry and the Yamal Peninsula with a liquid natural gas plant in Sabeta and so on, and they are exporting. But one problem is the shadow fleet, and that many of the vessels that are transporting the LNG, liquid natural gas, are banned in other ports and so on. So Atle wrote a great story the other day about how Russia is shifting the names of the ship. One ship is listed as sanctioned and the company who owns it, and the other day the same ship has got a new name somewhere out in the Arctic ice. They're painted over and written a new name and found a new flag on it and new owners, but of course it's the same. They are just writing different things about it. But this is very important in our for our journalism, is to track those changes. But the other part of the answer to your question is that Vladimir Putin's ambitions in the Arctic is much higher than what reality tells us when we are looking into the facts. So he has, for instance, built a huge port in Murmansk, which is nearly not in use at all, because the president ordered it, but the industry and the business is not able to deliver.
You, sir, I've got you, sir, and then you.
Hi, I'm Matthew Kupfer. Till recently an investigative reporter with the Russian service of Voice of America, and in the past with the Moscow Times, probably the last group of Moscow Times journalists whose work was given out in hotels. So I have a question, just thank you for this talk. It's very interesting, particularly because what I have been doing here is, I think, a bit in certain ways similar to what you're doing, which is essentially reporting on Russia from outside of Russia with no access. VOA had no one on the ground in Russia. I was wondering, you talked about it a bit, could you talk a little more about how, without access to Russia being closed off, you find the ideas for stories and how you go about telling them?
Well, we are getting better and better at using alternative sources and approaches. So it's kind of for us, it's kind of a never-ending hunt for finding good ways to find information. We use Russian social media quite much. Kontakte is although it's very bad, very many bad things about Kontakte, but you can still find some cool information there. Telegram as well, of course, but also we do use some open and available for publicly available data satellite services, and Russia is a digital, at least pretty much of Russia is digital. So there is possible to find databases. It's possible to find, for example, public tenders, data from there, which is interesting. But you have to dig and look, and it takes time. But once in a while you find some pretty cool things. And then you can start building on that and see what it comes out of it. But many times we get into a dead end.
Olesia, would you like to add something to that? How do you find information now outside?
Yes, I want to say that of course it became more difficult from since time when we became a desirable organization, because now I'm not able to call to Russia, for example, for people who can be persecuted. But as Atle told, we really use many sources. For example, I subscribed for like hundreds publics in Vkontakte, and every day I just scrolling those publics and looking for some comments, looking for people who are telling something interesting for us. And also we use closed databases. And in this time when censorship works and when we can't get information in normal way, I think we're able to do it. Also, we still have many open sources in Russia. For example, Goszakupki, it's a kind of tender service where we can find how much money government spent to some things, and actually there are many ways to find information now, and every day we learn something new in our newsroom.
Patsy, and then you down there, and then you, and then you. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Patsy Widakuswara. Until very recently, I was VOA's White House bureau chief. So forgive me, but great power rivalry is a thing that I follow, and I'm actually quite ashamed to admit that the Arctic is perhaps the most underreported for great power rivalry coverage. And in my career, I've only written one story about the Arctic, and that was after we went with President Biden to the US Nordic Summit. And I recall in 2023 writing about great power rivalry and the fact that President Biden wanted to ice out Russia out of every single organization except for the Arctic Council. And so my question now is, what is the dynamic in the Arctic Council? Is Russia still involved? Is China, being sort of like a near Arctic power, still making inroads? I'm just really curious because I feel like Indo-Pacific is very well reported in terms of great power rivalry, Middle East, of course, and Europe, but there's very few articles about Russia, the US, and China in the Arctic. And so, my information is 2 years outdated. I'd be very grateful for your update. Thanks.
You should subscribe to the newsletter of Arctic Today and the Barents Observer. Both of them are free, and you get them as email directly in. And there you will have all the Arctic stories. The Arctic Council is in trouble. There is no political contact between Russia and all the other 7 Arctic Council members, quite naturally, because the 7 other are all NATO members now, as Finland and Sweden have joined. But during Norway's chairship right now, Norway has decided not to call it chairmanship, they call it chairship. Very smart. In that topic, Norway has opened the door for science-to-science contact. So on some issues related to climate change, glaciers and this kind of thing, there are contacts.
So nothing has changed in the past 2 years? I mean, that was pretty much my story until that point.
Yeah, but we will see next week or 2 weeks from now when Denmark take over the Arctic Council, because then, of course, you have a quite big island halfway between Denmark and the United States. That probably would set the agenda for the future of the Arctic Council. Russia, on the other side, that is half of the Arctic, if you count on the coastline, they are looking to other partners, and you mentioned China. So worst case scenario for Arctic Council is that you will get 2 Arctic Councils. You will have one that is by the Western Hemisphere, then you will have Russia, who team up with other, not Arctic states, but other states that are interested in the Arctic, like China, India. There are others as well. Yes. North Korea, for instance.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, please. Yes, you. It's, yes. Okay. Good. Yeah.
My name is Viola Ginger. I'm with Just Security, an online journal. Given the increasing incidence of transnational repression in recent years, how can you talk a little bit about your security concerns for the outlet and your staff? And also, how secure is VPN when used, and how available is it inside Russia?
Who wants to take that? Do you?
I think the VPN question is good for Olesia to answer.
Yeah, Olesia, would you like to talk to us about that?
Yeah. Well, many people in Russia use VPN now, not only because they wanted to get access for independent information, also because they just want to, for example, use Instagram or Facebook, and it means that many of them have VPN. I think in Barents Observer we all have different ways to be secured. For example, I can say that I don't use my page when I use Vkontakte or other Russian sources. Also, I have password manager and what else? Of course, I use safe browsers, for example, like DuckDuckGo or something else. But I think, yeah, in Russian and English speaking rooms, we have different rules.
Hi, thank you for this great event. My name is Rachel Oswald. I'm a foreign policy reporter on Capitol Hill, and I want to follow up on Patsy's question about everything happening in Greenland right now. So supporters or people who are sympathetic to President Trump's demands talk about, you know, the critical minerals that it would be great to have while we're competing with China for them. At the same time, the way President Trump is going about this is very divisive, and there's a big public backlash in Greenland and Denmark, and I think among Denmark's close allies. Russia is increasingly becoming closer to China on a whole array of indexes. So what's your take about how this is all playing or not playing into Russia's hands if it is dividing NATO countries on a pretty important issue?
I think there has been quite much champagne in the Kremlin over the last couple of periods. But at the same time, I think it's very important to understand that Russia and China is not necessarily on all terms the best friends. They have not been that historically. And I think China's interests in Russian economy is not based on friendship, but on future and even long future possibilities of China's economy and so on. So, but I mean, on the critical minerals on Greenland and so on, I'm not too expert on that. So I'm sorry.
There's one more, and I think.
Yes. Hi, my name is Sasha Ingber. I'm here in the back. And I am an independent journalist. I have a Substack called Human. I tell human stories from the intelligence community. And I host the International Spy Museum's podcast on espionage and intel. It's called Spycast. So that being said, this question has more to do with your country's intelligence capabilities. Are they tracking Russian spying in Norway? What are their capabilities? Are they also contacting you when there could potentially be surveillance or threats a la Christo Grozev sort of style? I know you told the story about the FSB officer walking his dog, but curious to learn a little bit more. And thank you all for the work you do.
Of course, there are Russian spies in Norway. But are they doing illegal things? That's the big question. And there has been one GRU agent that were operating in Norway under false identity, who were arrested and took part in this prison swap with last year. But you know. In our area, in the Kirkenes region, it's very transparent. It's very difficult to be an undercover agent and doing real espionage work. But what we have experienced and what is challenging a democratic country is influence operations. That is not necessarily illegal according to the law. And how fake narratives and false stories are spread via Russian sources into the Norwegian population in order to make a split and to fuel a conflict that is already existing and so on. The best way to deal with that is, of course, journalism, to write about it and to encourage public debates and so on. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank all three of our panelists, especially Olesia, because I think it's your 2 o'clock in the morning now and you're a little bit sleepy, so I think we're going to let you go off and go to bed. But thank you very much. Thank you, all of you. And I'd like to also just thank the press club, and I'd like to thank Arctic Today for bringing together this really terrific panel. Thank you all.